So, hi, Anna. Thank you so much for making the time.
Hi, Francis. Thank you so much for you taking the time to speak with me. I'm really honored to have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So, okay, let's start with the basics. I think for those of us who barely remember, learning about the Silk Road in history class, can you first quickly describe what part of the world you're talking about?
So when I'm talking about the Silk Road, specifically with for my book,
Hmm.
it really is the stretch of land that sort of snakes from the coast of the Black Sea over by Georgia,
Hmm.
over to the Caucasus, across the Caucasus to the Caspian Sea, then down into Iran, up and around through Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and then down into China via Gansu province and the Hushi corridor there. But the Silk Roads has been interpreted by many different scholars, historians, whomever, as encompassing far more and far less than those that I just mentioned. You know, the British
Mm.
Museum had a exhibit last year that situated the start of the Silk Roads in Japan and the end of it in England. So there are actually
Oh,
a
wow.
lot of sort of, yeah, oh yeah. There are a lot of, then like Sweden was involved, sub-Saharan Africa. So it's really this, I think more and more an imagined um, moniker for something that symbolizes this sort of historic trade of the goods and people across overland. This is not, we're not
Hmm.
talking about, sea journeys. There are people who
Right.
talk about the like the sea Silk Roads, but this is specifically across Asia, overland across Asia, through the mountains, through the steppe, through the deserts of Central Asia, part of the Middle East, and into China as we know it today.
Yeah. And how did you become so interested in these places and their cuisines?
Well, I'm from one end of these. I'm Iranian American.
Hmm.
I grew up in Michigan, but my dad and my mom's from Michigan. She was born and raised there. But my father is Iranian. He moved to the U.S. in '64 from Iran. But so
Mm.
he's Iranian, and I grew up eating sort of food of that end of the Silk Roads.
Hmm.
And this is my culture. It's something I'm very, very familiar with, and I love, and I'm so happy to be able to share some of those recipes in the book with everyone. But on the other end, moving to like China, basically, I started going to China in the '90s when I was a teenager
Mm.
and really became interested in Chinese history and Chinese culture, but was particularly struck in like maybe the first month when I was a teenager, when I was a 17-year-old living in China, of this bowl of noodles that I ate that
Mm.
was super confusing to me, but also like very, very comforting. And I say confusing because it was at this restaurant that had this kind of like calligraphic script written in green. And, it turns out I know now that was the Arabic language. Um,
Oh, okay.
and the noodles were coated in this sort of like light but very flavorful tomato sauce. It had peppers and onions in it and these little chunks of lamb. And again, now with this flavor that I now know was cumin. So
Mm.
and I'm like, what am I eating? Where this is not Chinese food that like I know it, but I
Yeah,
tasted
sure.
it. I tasted this dish and it just tasted like home. And again, it's because now I know it's because of cumin, but it's also because this food, this noodle dish was from the Uyghur people in China who are an ethnic Turkic minority
Hmm.
from northwestern China in what's now modern day Xinjiang province, but
Right.
they have traditionally been scattered across Central Asia, way
Hmm.
back to when the Silk Roads were sort of very, very, very busy with traders, when the Uyghurs' ancestors, the Songdians, controlled the trade of the Silk Roads, and they're Turkic people. So it was like this other end of the Silk Roads where I'm like a teenager eating these noodles, being like, why am I eating this? What is this? Why does it taste like home? And then I learned over time, who these people were and why I was eating this food and how the way in which these cuisines were connected was because of this overland network of trade routes and because of the migration of peoples and flavors and food and ingredients that have traversed Central Asia from Iran to China and back again for
Yeah.
centuries. So for
I
me,
love
it's like
that.
really just like it's like it's me. And when I
Yeah,
when I
yeah,
was like
yeah.
from Baku to Beijing, like this is like this is the plane on which like I exist and I thrive, and it just this is my cuisine and my culture as well as so many before and after me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love how like you have your personal history, which is like a one point and like one end of the road, and then you were traveling to the other end of the road and you ate this bowl of noodles. You're like, what is this and why is it bridging these two places? Um,
Exactly.
it's so interesting too because I wanted to talk to you specifically about noodles, and I didn't I'm actually now, as you're saying this story, I remember you wrote about that bowl of noodles, but there's something about like the food, the category of food noodles that is so interesting to me in this area because I think when most people hear noodles, they think of East Asian, Southeast Asian cuisines, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Thai, Vietnamese, so on and so forth, right? Or they think of pasta and Italy, and we don't have to
Hmm.
go into the Marco Polo thing, but they eat a lot of noodles in Central Asia. And I don't think that many people know about these cuisines and know about the
No.
centrality of these noodle cultures. And it's amazing to hear you say, oh, this noodle dish was kind of the thing that like bridged, from Iran to China for you. Tell us about, I mean, you just described that bowl of noodles beautifully. But you have noodle recipes in the book, and there was one I was particularly interested in called Shivet Oshi.
Shivit
I'm
Oshi.
probably saying that
Yeah.
wrong, but tell us
I
about
probably
that
am
one.
too, but we'll keep it between the two of us.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you just go to a pasta aisle or an Italian restaurant. Any sort of green noodle you see in the US is from spinach. Maybe, I don't know, spirulina, but these are dill noodles.
Yeah.
And
It's so
dill was an
interesting.
herb that ended up in Central Asia from Iran, from the sort of Fertile Crescent, and it made its way over to Central Asia. And then, by the way, it just kind of stopped. You get some, I don't know if you noticed, like, you have some dill in northern Thailand in some of the Thai cuisine, but it
Hmm,
kind of
hmm.
like doesn't go any further, which I find personally interested
Dill
by
is
that.
like this mystery herb that just shows up in
Yeah,
places, and I don't
yeah.
entirely know why, but I'm sure it's from, ancient trade. But yeah, like there's one very popular dish in Vietnam that is
Hmm.
fried fish, like in
Yeah.
turmeric and with like a ton of dill on top. And
Okay,
like,
that
but
is
I'm like,
definitely because of trade. Turmeric and dill in Vietnamese food, is that spectacular?
yeah, but I'm
Yeah,
like, how did that
yeah,
get there? That's amazing. But also like, oh, when I think of dill, I often think of like Scandinavia,
yeah.
like very, very
Very,
totally
very.
different part of the world. But anyway, tell us about dill and
So
in
dill,
this
this
town in
dill, and
Uzbekistan.
so Shivit Oshi is from a western part of Uzbekistan, and that is out towards the Aral Sea, the now nearly dried up Aral Sea. This town called Khiva, Khiva, which I was just talking to someone who was like, "Oh, I've traveled all over Uzbekistan, but I never made it to Khiva." And a lot of people don't make it to Khiva because it's actually quite far west.
Okay.
And out in Khiva, that's where you find Shivit Oshi. This is the only place in Uzbekistan that you find this dish. You try to go find it in Samarkand, you'll fail. Bukhara, fail. Tashkent, fail. You can only find this in Kiva. And I asked over and over, I asked so many people, I'm like, where did this come from? Why in Kiva do you have these dill noodles? And they were like, it's just an old dish. We've always had this. We've always had this. I'm like, that is not helping me,
And it's
but
nowhere else.
whatever. It's nowhere else. The closest you get, and this is like really kills me, and like in the best way, is in Xi'an, in modern day Xi'an in China, there is a green noodle dish it's green from spinach. Spinach made its way into China and across Central Asia during the Tang Dynasty and the Silk Roads as well. Came from Iran, went in. It actually came via Nepal. So some of these Silk Roads like snaked into the mountains as well. Um,
Mhm.
but back during the Tang Dynasty, apparently the Tang courtiers were making green noodles with pagoda leaves,
Hmm.
some specialty like fancy pants tree found inside the palaces. And the
Okay.
hoi polloi of Tang China wanted to eat green noodles. So they started making these spinach noodles to approximate what they were doing as the courtiers were doing. And I mean,
Oh, interesting.
it's not dill,
But that's
but like
nowhere
I
near.
feel it's
That's
it's
like,
not dill at all, but I feel like there in my mind there's got to be some connection. Why? Because Xi'an was the sort of either terminus or starting point of the Silk Roads when they were at one of their like great trading strength periods of strength, and
mhm.
it would have passed, and all the trade routes would have passed through Kiva. So in my brain, I'm like, I feel like maybe you will never ever know this, but the fact that there are only these two places that you can find these gorgeous green noodles in this whole swath of, Central and into East Asia, maybe they're connected, maybe they're not, but whatever, they're both delicious.
Yeah.
And, like who cares? The Xi'an noodles are usually topped with the like that lovely stir-fried egg and tomato.
Hmm.
And the shivit oshi that you'll find in Kiva, and then the one that you find in my book as well, is topped with this like sort of beautiful carrot and potato um, and paprika, sort of almost like a tomato stew, like a goulash is the
Mm.
closest thing I could think to call it.
And with
And so,
beef, right? I
and
think
with
that, right?
beef.
Yeah, yeah.
It's with beef. Traditionally, Central Asian nations and cuisines have been really lamb heavy,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in the last, apparently since the breakup of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, there's been a lot of beef, and I imagine, frankly, that has to do with a lot of trade deals as well. And I mean, it works well for the book as well, I think, because in the US, we frankly don't eat as much lamb as they do either in the UK where I live or in Central Asia. So the fact that I was able to actually have use the same type of protein that they're using in Kiva in present day and then translate that into a recipe in Silk Roads that a home cook in like Illinois can make is like works out well for everybody because it's beef. What's for dinner?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I love the idea of like infusing the dill into the noodles though.
It's
And
so
then
fun
that
too.
flavor is so I don't eat a lot of dill, and so when I do, I'm like, oh, that flavor is so like intense, but like cool and interesting. I love it.
It's cool and interesting and it diffuses, so you're not having like, this like gravlax that's been coated in dill where you can really taste that super dilly flavor in with your fish. This is just, it's like, it's the subtle dill flavor that infuses the noodles that then like just sort of gets swept up in this like paprika-y, tomato-y beef stew on top. And it's really just, it's so good. I
Yeah,
gotta say,
yeah.
and it's just fun. Like you're like, yay, green dill noodles.
I love it. Okay, so I love that we've talked about Central Asian noodles. There's another sort of whole category of food here. Um, that is so important. It's the sweets, right? And like your
Ah,
family's from Iran and like the tradition of Iranian sweets. Um, but it's a little bit of a different culture, right? Than like one that we have in the US particularly. Like it's more small cookies and like syrupy, intense confections than pastries and big slices of cake or they're kind of like more compact intensely flavored things, lots of nuts and flowers and stuff. But you have a recipe in your book for an almond bundt cake that you had in your family.
I do. I
Tell us
do.
about that and why it's in the book.
So, I mean, everything you're saying there about the sweets tradition is one of the reasons I'm not a massive fan of
Mm,
of specifically of Iranian sweets that I grew up having as a child. I find I don't have a massive sweet tooth, and I found those sort of super syrupy, intense. Even like I like a piece of baklava, but I don't love a piece of like it's too much for me.
mm,
So, when I was doing the dessert chapter, I really wanted to sort of play with a lot of the flavors that were involved in these confectionery and cake and cookie traditions, but kind of weave in some American and some British baking traditions or sweets. I mean, I have a funnel cake, you know.
yeah.
Um, it's like instead of a gulab jamun or a zulbia, you've got a funnel cake dusted
Yeah, yeah,
with,
yeah.
rose petals. But the bundt cake is actually this is a cake that has been in my family, but I'm 44 for 44 years at least. And it is my take on a cake that my mother made for almost every single party we had when I was growing up as a child. We were sort of part and parcel of this lovely little Iranian American expatriate community in suburban Detroit.
Mm,
And my mom didn't speak a lick of Farsi or of Turkish. And back then, like there were no, obviously there's no Google, but there were also no Iranian cookbooks out. Like they just didn't
mm,
exist. So
sure.
she didn't really know how to make any desserts. It's one thing to learn how to make rice. It's one thing to learn how to make a kebab, but she didn't know how to make like Iranian desserts. And she would try it. I remember like family friends would taste it and my dad would taste it and be like, this is good soup, but something is missing. And she's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, what do I do
Yeah,
here?
yeah,
So
yeah.
what she did is she called upon her heritage, and she is, like I said, I think at the start of this talk, um, she's born and raised Michigander, but with an English and Germanic heritage. So
Mm.
she went to the grocery store, bought some like tin of pre-made sugary almond filling, and she probably like used Crisco in this cake too. Who knows? Um, but she made an almond flavored bundt cake, really
Mm.
drawing on that old Germanic like bundt tradition that is still so popular and beloved in America and certainly in the Midwest. Um, to make a bundt cake that sort of had that almondy flavor, like these sort of chewy almond macaroons that you would get in Persian desserts. But she
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
basically made a bundt cake. And everyone loved it because they also were like, okay, this has the right flavor, but she's not messing with something that is ours and doing it sort of not right, which people still don't like to this
Yeah,
day.
yeah, sure, sure,
So
sure.
she was like, well, I'm making my own, and I'm going to make sure that I make something not only that is extremely delicious, but that satisfies both my knowledge as an American baker and homemaker and host of these parties, but also satisfies the taste buds of all my guests and makes them feel comfortable, um, and as if they're eating something familiar, but they're not at all. And so
Yeah,
I
sure.
had this bundt cake, and I do not, for better or for worse, advise you to use this prepackaged almond filling. So I
Mm.
give you an updated almond filling, and there's like a yogurt dressing and everything. There's no Crisco, so it's sort of just an updated version of the cake that my mom grew up, or I grew up eating when my mom had parties, and
Oh, I love that.
it's just delightful.
Yeah, and I love that. I love how the book kind of comes full circle, even though it's from this place. The story of the book is about this place that's very far away from the US, far away from Michigan, but you bring it back home to where you came from. So that's such a beautiful metaphor for how the story sort of evolved. Thank you so much, Anna. It's been so
Thank
fun
you
talking with
so
you.
much, Francis. It's really been a joy. And yeah, one final thing to say is like that's also, this is a book about these cuisines from these far away places, but it's really also about how people travel and we take foods with us,
Mm,
whether it is, me now making this bundt cake in Michigan, or I mean in London, or, Shivit Oshi in Michigan. Basically,
right.
like these are how we move and our foods come with us. So yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you so much. This has been a great, great chat.